Hey everyone, welcome to the next episode of the Belinda Carr Show. Today we're going to be talking about spray foam. So I released 2 videos on spray foam last month. So the first one was on open cell versus closed cell spray foam. Got good feedback, good interaction, good numbers on that. And then the second one was on pros and cons of spray foam. And no one wanted to watch that one.
If I could criticize it in one way, I would say that maybe one reason people were turned off was because the first about 5 minutes, you basically summarize everything that's in the first video.
I do. I tend to just wipe my brain clean after posting a video and just so I don't remember what was in that video.
Spray foam's been a topic that has been an interest of ours for a long time.
Yeah, I didn't know too much about it until we visited that spray foam factory and lab in Dallas last year. I think that was April of last year. And we spoke to the chemists and saw how it was made, and we saw a live demonstration in those popcorn containers. So that's when my interest was piqued, because I just knew of it as a plastic insulation. I had a lot of misconceptions about its performance. And going there, talking to them, seeing how much research and development, continued research and development goes into the product made me appreciate it a lot more. It ties really well into that R-value video I made.
Busting R-value myths.
Yeah, because the R-value test really favors fibrous insulation and it doesn't take into account spray foam's air sealing properties, which makes it far better in real life than fibrous insulation.
Can you explain to me the R-value test and the reason why something like spray foam is negatively affected?
So what they do with the R-value test, they have this machine and they have 2 plates on the top and the bottom. So you open the door to this little rectangular box. You open the door and then you put this perfectly cut cube or cuboid of insulation material inside the machine. And then the top and the bottom plate move towards the insulation material and touch it on the top and bottom. And then those plates heat up. When it gets to a steady state, which means that the insulation, I believe this is what it is, the insulation material is the same temperature as the top plate and the bottom plate. I think that's called the steady state. That's when they measure how the resistance to the flow of heat, the material's resistance to the flow of heat. That's the R value is the inverse of that number. So that's why I think in Europe they use a different number, which is U value, which is the inverse of R value. So with fiberglass and rock wool, you can cut a cuboid, put it in there, and get an accurate number because that's how it performs in real life. With spray foam, it seals, it's supposed to, if it's applied properly, it's supposed to adhere to the sides of the studs, to the back surface too, and seals all the gaps. So it is unfair to cut a cuboidal piece of spray foam and stick it in that machine to see how much heat is flowing through it.
So a better test would be to actually have a wall cavity and put fibrous, like a bat of insulation in there, and then test the heat transfer versus spraying the wall with spray applied foam and then testing the heat transfer with that.
Yeah, but I get it. They had to eliminate certain variables, and a lot of variables in that instance where you just mentioned, like the method of applying foam or the thickness of the foam, all that stuff. So they had to eliminate certain variables to create a standardized testing.
So when they started, they were using fibrous insulation, and they came up with this test, and it's really catered towards that specific material because that's all they had. It's not really their fault. It's not like they're trying to push people away from spray foam. It's just that's something that needs to be updated.
Yeah.
So before you started doing all this research on spray foam, what was your impression of the material?
Like I said, it was just, I knew it was plastic insulation. I thought you basically had to be a chemist out on the job site to spray it onto walls. I thought there were too many things that could go wrong with it. I didn't really understand it. I had never seen it applied in person. I'd never seen the chemical reaction occur, and I only watched videos of it, and I didn't completely understand it until I spoke to this chemist and I started looking into the material a lot more.
And so you made a lot of videos on insulation materials before you visited that factory.
Yeah.
So now what is your impression of spray foam after that?
Well, I think spray foam has its place, and I think it is a long-term use plastic. It is not a short-term use plastic, and if it can, and it when applied properly, it can really help us improve the energy efficiency of our homes. It has so many advantages when applied properly.
So speaking of being applied properly, in your video you mentioned that in the future you predict an HGTV series of like horrendous spray foam applications and people having to renovate their house and tear it all out.
Not so much horrendous applications, but I think in 30 to 40 years when people are upset with textured walls, or maybe we go backwards because now everyone wants super smooth level 5 finish drywall and now they want textured walls. So God knows what the trend is going to be 30 years from now. And they have all these renovators come into their home, tear out the drywall and do all this stuff. They're going to find spray foam in between all their studs. Not that it was applied wrong, just that it hinders renovation work. So they're going to have an HGTV series on spray foam removal and installing the next generation of insulation material, whatever that is.
It will be a big market in the future because of, like you said, the electrical and the plumbing being inaccessible, and especially with something like closed cell spray foam.
So with our in-laws just built a house, I say just built, it was last year. They used open cell spray foam on their exterior walls, but obviously not on the interior walls. So most of their bathrooms are up against exterior walls. So all their PEX pipes come in from the attic down that exterior wall, and all that is covered in foam. So if they want any renovation work done, they're going to have to tear all that out, which might affect the sheathing or Tyvek right behind it, which is covered up by the brick on the outside of the wall. So one thing affects the other. You tear one thing out and you've got a whole new set of issues on your hands.
And with that demolition, reapplying the spray foam properly is also a big issue, or else you have a hole where you're losing that heat and the building's not performing as well as it should.
Yeah, exactly. You can't just use a can of spray foam from Home Depot and fill it in, because those are not meant to be thermal insulation. That's just supposed to like seal up holes in your walls to prevent bugs from coming in. You can't just use it on a large surface and hope it provides you good insulation.
So you mean to tell me some random contractor is not going to go to Home Depot and buy that cheap can and just fill it up and say, oh, it's good to go?
That is what they're going to do. But there'll be a lot of air penetration in that spot. So to learn more about spray foam in the construction industry and its evolution over the past couple of decades, I spoke to John Peters of Ecologic Insulation to learn some more about it. So to share some more information about spray foam in the construction industry, we've got John Peters, the founder of Ecologic Insulation, with us. Thanks, John, for joining the call.
Hey, Belinda. Thanks for having me on.
So I know you've been in the industry for quite a while. Could you share your background with us?
Sure. So my business partner and I started Ecologic Insulation about 16 years ago. We also own another brand called Seal Tight Energy Solutions. At Ecologic, we offer all things insulation and air sealing. At Seal Tight Energy Solutions, we offer building diagnostics, really anything envelope design, envelope consultation. We also offer a service from a company called AeroBarrier that helps to air seal the envelope, lower the ACH, which is kind of part and parcel with a lot of the governmental requirements that are sweeping the nation in terms of lower ACH for new construction. Prior to getting into the energy efficiency space, I was active duty military. I worked in electronic warfare on the B-1 bomber program. When I got out of the military, I worked as an applications engineer for a company that was in the metrology industry. And I worked my way up to product management. And from there, I started Ecologic. And it's been a wild ride, but very happy we entered the space. The kind of genesis or jump off for getting into the space initially, this was around 2005, 2006. Energy prices were soaring. There was more of a collective conscious in relation to energy efficiency, environmental consciousness. My business partner and I at the time actually were going to pursue renewable energy, so small wind projects and solar. And my technical background, after conducting exhaustive research into the space, we essentially came to the conclusion that what really matters is actually the envelope, the load, the ability to conserve the energy that's being produced. And that led us into products like spray foam insulation, dense pack insulation, and all things envelope and air sealing.
So instead of just treating the effect, you'll actually treat the cause, treating the consumption of energy in the building.
Precisely. And I hope my last comment isn't seen as a detrimental knock to renewables. I love renewables. And I think they've come a long way, and they're only going to go farther. I'm really excited about the renewable space. Like I said, for us at the time, the light bulb moment for us was, again, just conserving the energy, and that was revolved around all things envelope.
So most of your projects are in the Northeast, correct?
That's right. Yep.
So how many projects have you all completed over the last 16 years?
It's funny you ask. I wish we kept track and actually applied some metrics to that in terms of BTUs conserved. You could almost extrapolate out every square foot of insulation laid out and every ACH dropped and equate that to energy savings. Maybe one of these days I'll get around to calculating that out. But it's literally been thousands of buildings that we've helped out over the years. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a ton of fun.
So whenever I talk about spray foam to anyone in the construction industry or people interested in it, they always bring up prices because the prices of spray foam have fluctuated wildly over the last couple of years. Could you explain your experiences in that and the reasons behind it?
Yeah, what's interesting, when we first entered the industry and the spray foam side, prices were very stable. Yeah. We never saw any fluctuations. And I can say that applied for a good 12, 13 years. And it really wasn't up until the timetable of leading up to the pandemic where we started to see these steep jump ups.
So it was even in 2019, not just 2020.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of that had to do with consolidation within the industry. If you look back at the decades for the spray applied foam industry, it was very much a grassroots type of industry. Demands for it were specific to agricultural and industrial uses. Its use in the commercial space was really sparingly. And the players that were involved in manufacturing the products, again, were just kind of, for lack of a better phrase, redneck engineers that saw the value of spray applied foam from a pragmatic and use perspective in terms of solving problems, right? Whatever hygrothermal issue you have going on, controlling condensation, higher R value, air sealing. It wasn't until, I'd say probably the 2012, 13, 14 range where we started to see some private equity moving into the space, some bigger commercial conglomerates coming into the space.
So when you say consolidation, you mean like they were buying up small companies?
That's right. Yeah. Yep. So, consequently enough, when that consolidation started to occur is when we started to see little price jumps here and there. And then obviously once the pandemic started, all hell broke loose. Yeah. And all markets were affected. And spray foam specifically because it's such a ubiquitous product, right? There's so many industries that polyurethane foam touches. It casts such a wide net from a consumer goods perspective.
There are so many uses for it. It's not just for insulation.
Absolutely, Melinda. Yeah, from appliances to furniture to automotive, it's everywhere. So when we talk about its use in construction, unfortunately, demands that are placed upon the automotive industry or furniture industry or whatever has trickle-down effects on us in the construction space.
So you've seen not just raw material shortages, but actual spike in prices too. So how have you been able to price out projects?
It's been challenging.
Yeah.
I think for anyone, whether you're developer, general contractor, building owner, homeowner, if your eyes are open and you've been awake for the last 2 years, you understand that consumer good pricing is just skyrocketed. Whether it's food, again, automotive, whatever consumer goods we're referring to. The interesting thing is, no one's really surprised when those price increases are brought up. Certainly, no one's excited or happy about it, but it's kind of to be expected.
The consumer, or you mean like other contractors, builders,
Yeah,
every
whether it's the end user, the builder, the
and everyone's
contractor,
accepting
developer,
those higher prices, you think?
uh, begrudgingly. you know,
Hmm.
no one's happy about it. But yes, I would say for the most part, the demand is sufficient enough to justify the increased costs, and that demand is part and parcel with where we see real estate pricing, right? When we can acknowledge that real estate prices are above the mean, precipitously above the mean, we can rationalize those increasing costs and fixing that kitchen, renovating that bathroom, or even upgrading the insulation.
So, what about? Do you think the Texas freeze last year, almost a year to this? I think it was February. I think middle of February 2021. I was told that the chemical plants shut down for 4 months at least, and when I visited a spray foam factory in Dallas, they told me that the shutting down of those chemical plants directly affected the supply of the Part A and Part B polyurethane chemicals. Do you think
Yeah,
that's true?
absolutely, 100%. And it didn't just affect the polyurethane foam industry; it affected a wide swath of general and specific chemicals that are used in a wide variety of applications. And certainly polyurethane foam got hit by that. And talk about a wake-up call. I don't know, I believe you live in Texas, Belinda.
Yeah.
My hope is that the state of Texas and maybe even the federal government gets involved. I hope there's a greater awareness to the possibility of an occurrence like that happening again. And I hope all the respective manufacturers and really anyone that's operating a temperature sensitive facility has weatherized their building and systems, and to make sure that we don't go through this again.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I would agree. I think the freeze up in Texas was one domino to fall of many that has resulted in the price spikes that we've seen.
So you briefly mentioned the demand over the last couple of years. You've seen people in the residential industry picking it up. You've seen large corporations buying up all these small corporations. From your perspective, when you talk to people in residential or commercial construction, are they more interested in switching to spray foam now because everyone's talking about it and they see the benefits of it?
Yeah, I think it just really comes down to application dependency, comfortability. You have to keep in mind that the process of selecting a particular type of insulation for any project really starts at the specifier, starts the designer. And the designer has a comfort level with certain systems and products. And they're going to specify what's going to be best for the building and ultimately best for the end user. In some cases, that's spray applied foam. In some cases, that's could be fiberglass, cellulose. Certainly, personal preferences weigh into the decision making on this. But I would say, in my experience, performance and problem solving ability of the respective product or system is what's going to trigger a designer, architect to choose a particular product or system versus another.
So code requirements for the number of air exchanges per hour, which you mentioned at the start of this call, are you think that this building trend towards airtight buildings and all that stuff, this just going to keep the demand for spray foam is just going to keep increasing because of it?
I think so. I think, again, fundamentally, and I keep banging this phrase, there's just certain problems that spray foam can solve that some other systems products cannot solve.
Yeah.
And if you're looking to achieve particular R value or lower ACH, spray foam can check both of those boxes. Do I think we're going to see increased demand? I do. I think overall, if you were to grab a swath of end users that either live in or work in buildings that have spray applied foam, I think you'd find feedback that's very positive, whether it's in relation to comfort or performance. And with those positive feedbacks, you're going to see a return to specification for its use in other projects. I mean, the other side of this is, fundamentally, we have to acknowledge the fact that spray applied foam is cellular plastic,
Yeah.
right? And for many reasons, both legitimate and illegitimate, the word plastic has become kind of a bad word. In some regards, I think it's been unfair in certain product segments, particularly in construction, where, in my opinion, I think the goal of any product or system in construction should be that it lasts
Longevity.
hopefully
Yeah.
indefinitely, right? I
Yes.
mean, we want our buildings to stand hopefully forever. I mean, if you really want to get down to what is green and what is efficient, creating an indoor space that can last the test of time and also operate efficiently is really, really important. And certainly not to say that other products can't last the test of time, but we can look back at the last 20, 30, 40 years and acknowledge the fact that certain fibrous insulations, they do break down over time. And it's the nature of the beast. You take your pros and cons with all the different insulating materials that are out there and make a decision that's best for you, your family, your business. It's funny. I feel like the political divisiveness that we see in our country and in some regards across the world, I'm used to it. I've been living it my whole life in the insulation and energy efficiency field in relation to insulation. Insulation is as an industry is extremely tribal, and
Yeah.
I never understood it. Everybody has their products, has their ways of using their products,
And they believe
and
that that's the only way to go, right?
yeah, and they fight it. They will readily engage any opposition to debate, why theirs the best or why yours is the worst. As
That's what's
someone
so
who actually,
beautiful. I remember the first time I talked to you, the you said this in the middle of our call. You said, I never tell my clients that spray foam is the only way to go. I believe that every product has its particular use. Like there's certain applications where spray foam is perfect for, and the others where fibrous is perfect for. And that's what's so nice about the way you talk about spray foam. You're not pushing the product. You recognize its advantages, and you know that it's good in certain applications and not perfect in the others. In others.
yeah, and again, taking into account your personal preferences in relation to what materials that you are comfortable
Comfortable
with
with.
or that you want to have in your life. Yeah, and again, I harp on this a lot, but to me, if we're going to get into the place in plastics in our lives and our society, I mean, to me, single-use plastics is probably the most egregious thing that humans engage in. If we want to talk about plastics, such as say, composite trim or certain types of composite siding, again, that is going to give a building potentially 40, 50, 60 years of use. It's hard to look at those products that are composite and synthetic and say they don't have a place here. I think they do. But hey, we all have our own preferences, and I guess in some regards we let the market decide. And as far as I can tell, being in the construction space for as long as I've been, most consumers, designers, and architects want products that are composite, synthetic, that are going to last as long as possible.
So I visited a spray foam factory here in Dallas a couple of months ago, and I visited their lab and spoke to their chemists, and I was shocked when they told me that there's always this intense scrutiny in the spray foam industry. They have to constantly innovate, constantly change their ingredients and tweak their chemicals. And they talked about how other spray foam manufacturers try to get a hold of their sample and try to like figure out the raw materials in it and tweak their own. So they have to like be ahead of the game and constantly innovate. It's like
Yeah.
it seems so vicious.
It's true. It's true. It's very much cutthroat. I mean, if you were to do basic scan of polyurethane foam patents, the thousands and tens of thousands of application uses for polyurethane foam, from in place creation to say a board stock material. I mean, it blow your mind. There's just so many application uses for it, and you're right. Being in the industry this long and seeing manufacturers come and go, there is very much kind of a cutthroat approach to design, and certain types of ingredients that certain manufacturers will key in on. Also, ways to test materials. to get compliance with whatever metric you're looking to comply with. There's yeah, that's a very, very big part of the industry.
Yeah,
I mean,
because like just the R value test, like it favors fibrous insulation. So if you want R30 walls or something, even though closed cell foam can give you an equivalent R50 wall or something, but you're not going to abide by code, so you have to use something in addition to closed cell spray foam. Just something as simple as that. It seems like the codes are biased against spray foam.
well, I guess in some regards, the codes on a in a macro sense, don't acknowledge the air sealing ability of spray applied foam. And certainly, as you just pointed out, the R value test, it isn't really fair. It's not apples to apples if you look at how a sample of a foam board, spray foam, how that scales out in relation to fibrous insulation. But again, it comes down to application uses. I'll give you an example. So, it's very common in our country to take a fiberglass bat and lay it down on an attic floor, right? So you're leaving the whole top of the bat exposed. The reality is, if you look at how the bat is tested in a lab for R value, it's placed in an enclosed box, right? So when you take a fiberglass bat and you leave a big side of it exposed, you're essentially negating a significant percentage of R value by doing so. But again, the acceptance of using a fiberglass bat in that application is I mean, it's no different than using a stainless steel nail with wood siding. I mean, it's completely accepted in the norm. So yeah, I mean, from that perspective, I think better education would be is sorely needed in the industry. And again, I just want to preface with that last comment. I don't want to make it sound like fiberglass has no merit. If you can place fiberglass in a 6-sided box, it performs phenomenally well, and it has to be installed per spec as well. But yeah, I mean, if you're putting a fiberglass bat in an attic floor, you're doing the product a disservice to me.
So what's the let's get to some fun topics now after all that talk. What's the worst spray foam application you have seen? Have you had to come into any homes and had spray foam removal and redo like inferior work?
Oh yeah, I've seen that at least 3 occasions of the last 16 years. It's funny, you go online and you think stuff like this happens daily with some of the the bad websites that are out there. I have seen those occurrences happen, and it's really, really unfortunate. To me, it comes down to operator error, user error. Installing spray foam insulation is not rocket science. The equipment that you need to install spray foam insulation, while it's expensive, is from a design perspective relatively simple in terms of what each aspect of the equipment's doing. So if you have a situation where bad spray applied foam was installed, it really is a case of just hyper negligence on the part of the installer. We've been installing spray applied foam around the world since the 50s. We know what its limitations and best uses. And when I see a bad spray applied foam job, it's just a really sad situation, because not only is it traumatic for the homeowner or building owner, but it's extremely expensive to remove and get things back to normal.
And it's also bad media, because that one bad application negates all the 99 other good applications of the product.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things, Belinda, where, for every bad spray applied foam job, I've seen 20 bad fiberglass or cellulose jobs, right? And I guess the difference is, the extent of the removal may not be as intrusive when you're removing when I say bad fiberglass or cellulose, I'm referring to applications where
like it has gotten rot in mold, slumped
mold and condensation, structural elements have been degraded and need to be replaced. I mean, I literally see that on a weekly basis. It's funny is when we see those situations, we don't say, oh, fiberglass was the problem. We say, well, someone vented this roof incorrectly, right? Or someone installed the fiberglass incorrectly. It's never the bat's fault. It's never the cellulose insulation's fault, the rock wool's fault. And it's interesting with spray foam, when we see a bad spray foam job, we automatically say, well, the product failed.
Yeah.
We never look at the installer or the designer and say, well, they failed, right? This shouldn't have been used here.
So, of the failures, do you think many of them are DIY applications? People thinking they could take on more than, like, they were just overconfident?
Yeah, I've seen, so of all the failures I've seen, I saw one that was a DIY failure that was, these little froth kits. Again, had they read the instructions correctly, had they been experienced in using the DIY kit, that project would have been a successful install. Interestingly enough, without getting into names or details, the person, the home whose DIY foam failure belonged to was someone who's very high regard in the energy efficiency world. Um, Again, I won't get into names, but it was, he thought he could do it on his own. He tried, and it had to all get removed.
So, from your professional opinion, would you recommend people buy these DIY kits from their local hardware store, or is there a significant difference in the performance of those products compared to the professional products?
So, from a performance perspective, I think if you were to ask, let's say, 20 insulation professionals, I think they'd all agree that when you're talking about high pressure spray applied foam versus low pressure spray applied foam, the material consistency, the adhesion characteristics, while on paper they may look the same, to me, I think there's much more substance to a high pressure spray applied foam application. Would I recommend DIY foam applications for the average homeowner? I think it just comes down to your level of comfortability and your ability to acknowledge you know what you know and you know what you don't know, and hopefully you can go out there and educate yourself on the proper use of it. The other side of this question is there is a cost benefit analysis that you really have to conduct when looking at DIY foam kits. If you're doing a small bathroom renovation or a small kitchen renovation, I think a DIY foam kit, if you're handy and willing to get a little dirty, is the way to go without question. If you're talking about a bigger job, let's say a whole attic, a large footprint of a building where you're insulating the foundation walls. If you're getting into 2, 3, 4, 5 of these DIY kits, I would say, financially speaking, that is not a wise decision, because the cost per R, right? The cost per R, cost per board foot of the DIY kits is exponentially higher than a high pressure spray applied foam. And when you get to a certain volume of material installed, what you'll find is, even with the margins that an installer may be applying on a high pressure spray foam install,
Turns out
you're
to be
much better
cheaper.
off. Yes, you're much better
Yeah.
off paying those margins than trying with the DIY kit.
So, on the other side, what's one of the best applications you've seen where you've come in with a building that's performing very poorly and you had to retrofit it, and you looked at the energy bills, compared them, and it was a significant improvement?
Sure. Honestly, I think the some of my favorite jobs are for just average people that are working very traditional jobs that, for whatever reason, came into some money and are able to renovate their house, like to renovate a substantial portion of their house. They've lived in the house for years, possibly decades. Prior to the renovation, the house was very inefficient and leaky, and they've maybe prior to that house they lived in another inefficient house. So their perception of what's normal, right? What they're willing to live with in terms of inefficiency or comfort, you develop this baseline, like this is just how it is, right? In the middle of January in the Northeast, I'm supposed to put on my jacket in my living room if I want to sit on my couch and watch TV. And the reality is, with good performing windows and doors and a great insulation package, take into account low ACH, you can have a space that will just knock your socks off. And I'd say my favorite jobs are working with families that go through that transition, and I get to see them on the other side. And they're just like, John, I had no idea an indoor space can be this comfortable. Um, so I'd say those are my favorite projects on a personal level. I guess on a more professional level, some of the commercial buildings we worked on, some of the more high-end residential jobs, really spectacular type of spaces that are just designed beautifully. I think That's probably more the eye-catching stuff, indoor pools and things like this. But at this stage of my career, what really gets me excited is actually not that stuff. It's like I said, it's getting an average family from extremely inefficient to hyper efficient, and then they can tell their friends about it, and then hopefully they're able to make a similar transition.
Do you ever worry about retrofitting an old home with spray foam? Like worry about it being too airtight without revamping the HVAC system and all that, everything else that goes with it?
Yeah. So I'd say applications that concern me in regards to insulation upgrades or substantially lowering ACH for a building, really where my spidey sense starts to tingle, are buildings that have steam heat. Being in Texas, you're probably like, what's steam heat? It's something that was very popular in the Northeast for a time. Probably Midwest, you'll find some old steam heat systems as well. You don't have to be too imaginative to figure out why steam heat in tight envelopes would be a bad idea. You lower your ACH, let's say below a 3. You have a steam heat system that's emitting all this humidity into the air. Well, where's that humidity going to go now? You have these hyper increased humidity levels in the home, and that can create some problems. And I've seen this situation pop up not just with spray applied foam, but other insulating systems that seal everything up. So to answer your question, yes, I do see applications that concern me if a client's unwilling to leave a steam heat system. For any other heating system, whether it's forced hot air, furnace, hydro air, traditional hydronic baseboard, no, I don't get too concerned about that. I mean, certainly we can do blower door tests to make sure that we're not making it, I'm using the air quotes, too tight. Certainly if we pass that 3 ACH threshold, we want to make sure that mechanical ventilation is being installed.
So my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, they just built a new house here in North Dallas, and they use spray foam in their home. And it really was very surprising because I thought most of these homes that are put up in this area are all just fibrous insulation. So we saw it installed before and after. And whenever we go in there, I don't think the AC ever runs. Their electric bills are minimal. So have you seen a lot of interest in new residential homes being constructed with spray foam, like compared to what it was when you started 16 years ago?
Yeah, I think so. And again, it comes down to performance output, and kind of getting the word out in terms of what the product can do.
You think the consumers are more educated now? Like they know about air exchanges per hour, they know about indoor like healthy air and all that stuff? Is that why they're more interested in it?
I think so. And I think as a society, if we're going to look at the United States specifically, concerns about what we drink, what we eat, there's a much more awareness as to how our environment affects us, and I think indoor air quality is on that list now. Maybe not number one, but for most people. But it's creeping up. Yeah, and certainly air sealing the envelope is going to assist in improving ACH, but it goes part and parcel with an HVAC system that is properly sized from a tonnage perspective, and also bringing in fresh air and taking out stale air. The other side of this is humidity control. This is probably old hat for you in Texas and in the South. I think that's one thing that's probably overlooked more than it should be. And personally speaking, I'd like to see more code specifications regarding humidity control in construction. Because as we're tightening up our buildings, I'm seeing elevated humidity levels. And I think inline dehumidifiers or crawl space dehumidifiers, as far as I'm concerned, they should be code required.
It's funny you say that. So in our first house, I never monitored our humidity levels or anything, but in this house, I have little air thing sensor. And now in these winter months, not that it gets as cold here as it does in the Northeast, but our humidity is at 20% every day. It's
Really?
ridiculous. And we don't know what to do to increase humidity levels. But it's just
That's
weird.
Where in Texas are you?
In Dallas.
Interesting. I used to live in Abilene when I was in the military. And yeah, I'd say the winter months it does get pretty dry out there. Certainly, if you're in Houston, you're right. You're going to see
Yeah.
some really elevated humidity levels. I think if you had to choose between adding humidity to a building or taking it away, right? To me, I think the more important measure is
Taking
taking
it
it away,
away.
right? And if you're someone that's extremely sensitive to low humidity levels, you have the nosebleeds or your skin gets dry and itchy, space humidifiers, small space humidifiers, to me are the way to go. This is probably going to turn some people off in the HVAC industry, but I personally speaking, emitting humidity into enclosed ductwork is not something that I would engage in personally.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, it's a dark space. There can be long periods of time where air is not flowing in your ductwork, and you're spraying, moisture in the ductwork. I think you're asking for some trouble down the road.
That makes sense. So, what do you have in store for this year? How do you want to grow your business? What projects do you have planned?
Well, I think like a lot of small businesses, we're up against labor issues like everybody else. Um, we when I started this company, um, we really, again, the initial kind of jump off was renewables, but whether it was getting into renewables or making the envelope better, I had I guess, two criteria that I really had to scratch. One was just this entrepreneurial urge that I had, um, just to want to do things on my own terms, and the second was to try to make a difference. And I guess for us, making a difference in our own little way is just reducing energy usage and making buildings more comfortable. So that's always kind of been our North Star in terms of what we're focused on. Second to that is just quality, and the quality and the labor kind of go hand in hand. I'm sure for any small business that's out there, they could easily open the floodgates and just hire whoever,
Yeah.
and try to ramp up growth in kind of an uncontrolled way. For us, we've always been methodical and slow and plotting and finding the right people, taking really good care of them, and then making those next steps. So I guess for us for the next year, we don't have any aggressive plans. We're going to keep pushing on the Ecologic side with insulation, air sealing. Keep pushing on the Seal Tight Energy Solution side with the building diagnostics and aero barrier, and hopefully just get the word out that we're here and we can help you out.
So thanks a lot, John, for sharing all that info with us. And if you want to check out any of their projects, Ecologic's projects, check them out on Instagram. The Instagram handle is at Ecologic Insulation. Looking forward to speaking with you again and maybe diving in deeper into the chemistry behind spray foam and its advances over the last decades.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely, Belinda. Yeah, I'll take me on anytime. This was great. Had a lot of fun.
Thanks, John.
Why do you think John calls it spray applied foam?
It's a good question because he refrained from saying just spray foam.
Never in his interview did he say spray foam. It was always spray applied foam. So it kind of makes me think of when plumbers get frustrated when someone says a hot water heater.
Because there are other sprayed foams. I mean, there are the foams like polyurethane foam, what's in your couches, what's in your like seats, and even in your cars. That's just foam. But sprayed foam,
So there is a difference between EPS, XPS, polyiso, and polyurethane.
Yeah.
Which is spray applied foam.
So polyiso is basically sprayed foam, but it's sprayed by a machine on a surface.
So it's just foil-faced spray applied foam.
Yeah.
I'm going to start saying spray applied foam now.
Spray applied foam? Okay.
Because he sounds like a professional. One thing I really liked about John's discussion was that he was adamant to not bash any other form of insulation. He's very honest about, hey, this spray applied foam works in certain situations, and in other situations, fibrous material works.
I like talking to him. It's the second time I've spoken to him. He's very level-headed, has an excellent insight into the industry, especially for someone who hasn't been in the industry. He came from a different background, but he's so knowledgeable about it and has such a respect for all different materials. And it's nice to talk to someone like that.
So John is obsessed with ACH, which is air changes per hour.
We should have a count on the video that
Of how many times he says ACH. It seems like John Peters believes that the lower your ACH is, the better. But I feel like at a certain point you get too low. You need to bring fresh air in.
So the ACH test is done, I think it's done with the blower
The
door
blower
test.
test, yeah.
And I need to do more research into it and I want to make a video on it. But I believe you turn off all your HVAC equipment and you pump air into this through your front door or whatever door you choose. And then you see how much air is leaking out through your windows or any other points that you missed. So it's not about your HVAC equipment at all. It's about how well sealed your home is.
So it's not about bringing in fresh air to breathe. It's about how much air is leaking from your house.
Correct.
Well, I didn't realize that.
So they try to get the lowest number possible.
Well, that makes sense.
Yes.
Maybe I was looking up the wrong thing, actually, when it came to ACHs or air changes per hour. But the recommended number of air changes per hour in a bathroom is like 3 to 4.
Okay, so I'm not an expert at this, but I'll do some more research into it after this video. But looks like we are talking about two numbers. One is when you do a blower door test to see how much air is leaking out of your home.
And that's what John Peters is talking about.
And then the other ACH number refers to your heating and cooling system or your HVAC system. And that's to make sure that a sufficient amount of air exchanges is seen in a space to provide it with clean air.
So is there any material, any insulation out there that is better than spray applied foam when it comes to ACH?
Well, you look at Matt Reisinger's house. He didn't use spray foam. He used rock wool on the inside and then I think he used comfort board on the outside for continuous insulation. So you do not need to use spray foam to get an airtight house.
It's about the whole system.
It's about the whole system. You can use continuous insulation on the outside and seal it up properly. It's not about just the material.
One of the things that y'all have in common that you've talked to me about is short-term single-use plastics versus...
Yeah, and I wonder if he actually shaped my views because I've spoken to so many people over the last year, which I'm very grateful for. I spoke to him really early on in 2021, and I remember being very influenced, or I really appreciated his views, and I learned a lot from that really short conversation. And I wondered if I subconsciously picked up on all that stuff that he mentioned and like stored it in the back of my brain. And then while doing subsequent research, I always came back to that and how insightful all those comments were. Like the distinction between single-use and long-term use plastics. Was that because he mentioned it during my first call last year? I'm not sure.
So I thought it was funny that John mentioned that the insulation industry is tribal. And that reminded me of the video that you made about NYMA.
Yeah. I mean, he talked about how like this fibrous insulation, I don't know if rock wool and we can lump rock wool in with fiberglass. There might be some competition between those two as well. But they have their group. You have the spray foam group. You have the sheep wool insulation group that believes they are the way to go, and everyone else is just toxic stuff that's ruining our health and our environment. So, and we saw that. I think that exists even within the spray foam industry, because when we visited the spray foam lab here in Dallas last year, they were talking about how they have to constantly come up with a new formula, because everyone, like with KFC, everyone's trying to figure out what are was it 31 ingredients, certain number of ingredients that you season your chicken with.
Yeah, or like making Chick-fil-A sauce or something.
They try to, what is that called?
Reverse engineer it. So that constantly occurs in the spray foam industry too. So it's not just this tribal nature is not just outside the spray foam, but even within the spray foam industry. So you mentioned sheep wool and how there's like a cult following around that material. There's a lot of like natural materials that people are raving about right now that work so great, that they're these newfound materials that people are going to start building their buildings with, but they're one, they're really expensive, and two, they don't perform as well as these synthetic materials. And so one thing John mentioned was like, when it comes to cost, if it costs exactly the same and one performs better than the other, someone's always going to pick that product. So I feel like this like organic natural material use in buildings is going to struggle to find any ground.
I don't know. I think there are certain people out there, like the van conversion people, who don't look at performance as much. Well, for one, they're sleeping in a metal tin, which is highly conductive. I mean, heat and cold just go right through. There's only so much a sheep wool insulation is really going to do.
Sounds like a shipping container.
Let's not bring that up. But so for them, it's more about peace of mind that there's no chemicals, no off-gassing, that the inside of their van is going to smell like a sheep, because it really does.
But that's just the minority. That's the thing, is like peace of mind is only going to get you so far. And the average person is going to look at two things, and if one performs better, they're absolutely going to use that material if they're the same price. Now,
if not, price takes precedence.
Yes. If sheep wool could somehow bring its price down, then maybe it would be a more viable solution.
It would.
So you mentioned the proprietary two-part material. Well, I guess it's one part is proprietary, one part is everyone knows. Why does everyone have to keep it so private and proprietary?
Well, if you're inventing a product, you want it to stand out from all your competitors. Otherwise, if someone has enough funds, they can just produce it in larger quantities and offer the same product for less. But if yours is superior to theirs, if theirs is an inferior product, then you have the advantage over them. So why would you want it to be open source?
How different are these materials really from one company to another?
Pretty different, because it depends on the climate, depends on when they're made. A certain spray foam should be used in summer, another type of spray foam should be used in winter. It's several different mixes should be used throughout the year and in different climates too. There are several variations.
You would think there would be like a standardized organization that would come out with, here's your baseline part B material.
And I'm sure that's what the Home Depot and Lowe's stuff is. That's the baseline material that's open source. And that's what you can use with your low pressure spray applied foam equipment. But if you want to use high pressure spray applied foam equipment, then you use the proprietary mixes.
So one difference that you and John have is that he believes that if you're knowledgeable enough, you can successfully do a DIY spray applied foam application.
For smaller projects.
Yeah, he mentioned something like a bathroom or a kitchen renovation, where if you know your stuff, if you're savvy enough, you can figure it out. And he believes that's the best solution, even if it comes to renovating an older home. And that's always something that we've shied away from, because we know that older homes are supposed to be able to breathe.
Yeah, I'm still wary about DIY applications of it, just because I feel like there are lots of variables, the temperature, humidity levels, and I'm sure those DIY friendly products available at hardware stores, they have a larger margin of error in the mix itself.
Like you said, it's kind of the baseline.
Yeah, it's like a watered down version of it. I would definitely consider using spray foam at a new house, a new build, but I don't know about doing it in this house.
That's what I was going to ask, because right now we're in the middle of renovating our bathroom, and eventually we're going to be renovating our kitchen. Would you be opposed to doing that?
Yeah, I'm still wary about it.
Regardless of the fact that we have a ton of rock wool in the garage.
Yeah, because I don't know, it seems really messy. It seems like a huge undertaking. And I don't know if it would help this house in any way, because like I said, you seal up 2 bays. There are 200 other bays that are leaky. How much are you really helping? If you want a quick renovation just for aesthetics and not for performance, then I think just use something like rock wool or fiberglass. Like you're half-assing it. Then it's like, what's the real advantage to going through all that effort to do 2 bays in your kitchen or your bathroom? It's not really helping the performance of your home. So I think spray foam is just going to continually get more and more popular in residential applications, not just commercial. But there's one thing that that John said that was very interesting, was that whenever fiberglass fails, we always blame other factors: humidity, water penetration, all that stuff. It's never fiberglass itself that is to blame.
It's the WRB, it's the structure itself. It's, there's mold in the wall.
But with spray foam, you always, if one house goes wrong and 99 others are successful, you'll have that one house blasted all over the internet, and it's the product's fault. It's not the installer's fault. It's not that there was water penetration to something else. It's always the product's fault. And that's a shame. I don't know if that's lobbyists behind all that negative media, but I have seen a lot less of it recently compared to a couple of years ago, which is a good sign. Maybe installers are becoming more educated. They're going through more training. Maybe the product itself is becoming more resilient because of the constant innovations in the industry, constant tweaks to the chemical formulae. So I really think this whole spray foam industry is just going to continue to grow. Hopefully they get their prices stabilized after all this craziness.
Same goes for everyone.
Same goes for everything, lumber, steel, whatever, everything else. So I hope you enjoyed this video on spray foam installation. We'll try to make another podcast, maybe interview John or someone else later, diving into the chemistry and some more technical aspects of it, because that's what I get excited about. Join us next week for another episode on building science, products, and technology.